Hey everybody, this video is going to be kind of a big complaint and rant, and also some best practices, some ideas for school administrators to make your school experience immeasurably better for teachers, which will then make it better for parents, easier for you, and frankly will help to educate the students more. So please pay attention if you want to just straight up improve your school. And this is based on not just my current location, but past schools and frankly other places as well, other businesses as well. But this is, some of the boring shit. And so, this is going to be about policies for teachers to know that administrators don't even need to create. We can create them, but we need buy-in, and we need you guys to accept it and to enforce it, right? So that's really the crux of this. We need policies that make sense, that the stakeholders are involved with creating and want to buy into, that we can use every day. So this isn't just good for existing teachers, but it's especially good for new hires as well. And with this current COVID bullshit going on, it would save us so much time and frustration and headache to give us guidance. So you can already see some of the stuff that I got listed here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is simply programs. So some teachers have Mac, some have Windows. A lot of y'all have Chromebooks, especially in America. That's awesome. But there is still a set of programs that you're going to need to use on a daily basis. Now, there are some other programs that you'll use too, of course, that are sort of non-standard, right? But basically, all of us are going to use a browser heavily, are going to use things like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, or in the Google world, Docs, Sheets, Slides, so on. Firstly, you need to standardize on the set of programs that must be used always. Not just what you want us to use, not just what you hope people will use. You need a set of standards that everyone follows in every department, in every year, across the board, okay? So firstly, and these are my suggestions, but of course these can change. Tell your people to use Chrome, okay? It's available for every platform. There's add-ons and stuff like that. You can sign into your Google Drive and everything. It's based on an open source Chromium, and so it tends to be secure. Yeah, it's kind of a memory hog. It uses a bit of processor, but at the same time, anyone with a computer built in the last 12 years should be fine. I've literally got my home theater PC right here running Chrome all day with YouTube and stuff like that, and for videos and home media. And that is a Core 2 Duo, I think, which is, again, 12, 13 years old with 4 gigs or 8 gigs of memory. It's a piece of junk by all means, and yet it will still run Chrome reliably for everything I need to do. The next thing is anything that we're using for Office. And I would recommend going with the Google Suite, because if you use Word, PowerPoint, Excel, if you're using Office 365, where you can save stuff to Microsoft Drive, and then you can collaborate that way, then make your standard Word and make it a particular year as well. So if we're talking about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, are we talking the 97 to 03 file type? Are we talking the newer file type? Are we talking the Word 95 file type? You might want to go back that old if there's some reason where you would need to, in which case that's fine. But standardize on one of these. The problem that you're going to find is, okay, I've got a new computer with Office 2019, let's say. I think that's the newest version. Somebody else has an older one running 2013. I may save it to some newer file format or some incompatible file format that's not going to open on that person's computer. Now they're emailing me back, saying back and forth, neither of us are very tech savvy. Oh, I don't know what the problem is. I think it's my computer. I think it's your computer. Let's call the IT guy. Now you got 3 people wrapped into it, wasting time that doesn't need to be wasted. So standardize on that shit today. Make a policy around it. Y'all need to write policies that are enforceable that everyone follows, okay? It's going to save so much headache with things like file formats. If you need to save a picture, a simple picture, you can standardize on, let's say, JPEG, right? You can even say, don't use .jpg, use .jpeg if you want to get that specific. If you're talking about audio formats, you can standardize on the bit rate and on the frequency. Is it 44.1 kilohertz? Is it 48 kilohertz for anything that we're doing that needs to be shared with students and with parents? If we're talking about video formats, for instance, do you want it saved as MP4, AVI? Do you want it to use H.264 codec, H.265 codec? These are all silly, stupid things that teachers don't know a damn thing about, shouldn't need to learn, and that's why there needs to be a process and a policy around it, where you administrators say, look, always use MP4. We like it because it's old and it works with all of everything, and you can always convert into it and out of it, and there's no issues with licenses. Always use MP4. Or you probably wouldn't want to do this, but maybe you want to say always use AVI, okay? Because it's simply compatible. And then any program and software that you have to use that is not compatible with it, you should replace, right? So take the file formats and make sure it fits all your programs. Take the programs, make sure it fits all the formats. And again, as administrators, my guess is you don't know all this stuff, and you shouldn't be expected to. This is where the IT team and the IT teachers as well, not just the folks dealing with your infrastructure, but the folks teaching it too, should get together with some stakeholders, with some of the folks from each of your departments. So have 2 English teachers there, 2 science teachers, 2 math teachers, and so on, so that they can say, hey, we need to use, instead of JPEG, PNG, and here's the reason why. And okay, maybe you make an exception to this policy, but write that down. Maybe there are no exceptions, and you say to that science teacher or whatever, figure out a way to use JPEG. You cannot use PNG. And it may sound arbitrary and silly at first, but when you do this, you ultimately make the job easier for us. By taking those decisions and that bullshit out of our mind, we can focus on the content that we're creating. We can actually do things that are improving the school and the work and the education that the students get, right? Because frankly, when it comes down to it, I mean, it doesn't matter if the student sees an MP4 or an AVI so long as their device plays it, and most devices will play both. But as teachers, that might be very confusing. We might look at that and be like, my God, I don't know. Let me search Google and figure out which one I should use. Well, now, is it 720p or is it 1080p? That's another thing that you ought to standardize upon. Should I do it at PAL or NTSC, right? This is stuff teachers don't want to have to deal with, shouldn't have to deal with, shouldn't even have to consider. When you're telling teachers what programs to use, if you're telling a teacher, okay, we want you to use PowerPoint to make videos, what are the acceptable formats for the output? Again, if they're converting things to MP4, great. But then now what if your standard is AVI? PowerPoint doesn't do that. Do you tell the teacher to convert it? If so, what software? Or do you send it to the IT group and have them convert it? There needs to be a process in place. And this is actually sort of getting into the practices part of it, but there needs to be a process in place to explain that to the teachers. Because these teachers don't know, and they shouldn't be expected to learn unless they're IT teachers, which then, of course. One of the things that y'all normally get right is with marketing stuff, because especially at private schools, obviously you want your name to be out there and look good and whatever, but it goes so much deeper than you normally go. I mean, a lot of schools will tell you, use this PowerPoint and that's it. What about letters home? What about exams? What about homeworks? What about just anything? You can even, I mean, when I was in high school anyways, the teachers would tell us, like, okay, here, I'll slide this over for a moment. Oops. They would tell us, like, okay, on the heading for your papers, we want you to put, we want you to put name here, and then on the next line down, date, and then over here what class you're in and what time it is, and then over here write my name, write the teacher's name, okay? And that's how you'll create every single document that you're going to write for me, the teacher, as you, the student. You can even get into this, or maybe you only make this for 9th grade up, right? Maybe you don't want to deal with that in middle school. But that's an important thing, because now the students are starting to understand the value of these policies and procedures and best practices too, when the teachers have it to give them the guidance. But we need that guidance from you. We need you to fucking listen when we're asking you these things, and not just pawn it off and say, oh, it's not that important. I assure you it is. It's incredibly important to us, because it's such a time waster later on. Again, practices. This is just another, such a simple thing that y'all can improve so quickly and easily. Saving files, for instance. Let's say we're using Microsoft OneDrive, right? When I open up OneDrive initially, there's nothing there. At least I don't think. I don't use OneDrive, but it's a blank drive as a teacher. So if I start saving things, and I'm working for you for 5 years, what happens if I get COVID and I'm dead tomorrow? Are you going to be able to find my information within my folders or not? Are you going to have to sit there and search and pull out all of that stuff and sort it all around if you need to find something from 3 years ago because it's critical, it's important? Let's say there's, God forbid, a lawsuit against you and you need to see some information that for whatever reason I have. Can you find it? My guess is no, because you probably don't have a good policy for how to save things. But this is where you need to give us guidance. And frankly, you need to be in the business of even saying things like, okay, if you're saving things, you're going to have the root folder, the main folder. Your IT guys can explain this to you if you don't understand. And then I want you to create a folder based on the year. And then I want you to create a folder based on the class. And then inside the class, I want you to have one folder for each student, because that's the way we do things at this school, let's say. And you need to lay this stuff out so that teachers can easily be guided into how to save things. Because frankly, you know, a lot of these teachers and a lot of you administrators, I'm sure, have a desktop that is completely full of all of the files that you're using at the moment, and there is no organization. There is no way to figure out where anything is. And your best bet is to do a search, which is slow and tedious and doesn't always find what you need because you don't always know the names, right? Why would you waste time on something like that over years and years and decades, okay? If you take a small amount of time and create a policy that can act as a framework for me, now we're not dealing with any of that bullshit. You're not, I'm not, and if I kill off dead tomorrow, none of my colleagues are when they're looking through my stuff to find the information that they need. It's as simple as I'm on holiday and my battery dies, or I'm out of service or whatever in another country, and you need to get to my stuff. Good luck, okay? If the policy is do whatever the hell you want, all right, I'm going to save everything to my home server, and I'm not going to put anything on Drive or OneDrive or anything like that because you didn't give me any guidance. And now if you need it, you need to come to me directly. Well, that's great until you need it and I'm not available, and then you're screwed. And nobody is to blame but y'all who didn't make a policy for it. I'm sorry to be blunt about that, but seriously, learn, listen, figure it out. File formats already mentioned. Oops, sorry. File formats I mentioned. Naming conventions. This is such a simple thing. What do we name homeworks? What do we call file folders? What do we name videos? All of this stuff matters immensely right now, especially because of coronavirus and COVID and whatever. But you need to look at this as a turning point, right? We've talked for 15 years. I mean, I remember 20 plus whatever years ago when I was in high school talking about online education and, the next big thing. And of course, there are tons of college courses online and things like that. Well, it's gotten to a point where, as you can see, as of right now, which this is, what's today? August 19th, 2020. We are doing online education around the world for everybody, for everything, right? And so there's no more talk of, there shouldn't be any more talk of like the what ifs. We're in it. And these policies need to reflect the importance of all of this type of stuff. There's way more than that too. But this is like the stuff off the top of my head. You also need to think about where should we be loose with our technology policies and conventions and so on. Such as, okay, you're going to want to accept not only Windows but also Mac if you want teachers to work on their own devices. If I just went out and spent $4,000 on a new Mac laptop, and you come and tell me, oh no, you need to go buy a new Windows one. No, at this point you need to furnish me with a Windows one, or create a way for me to be able to use the Mac one. Because you have to make sure that your expectations are reasonable with your teachers, especially considering what we're paid, right? So, and that's fine. I realize my picture is covering some of this stuff up. Sorry about that. But this all needs to be clear, and sometimes you need to be loose with your policies, sometimes you need to be rigid and specific. And the more specific you can be, the easier it is for us in the long run. And it's going to seem like a tedious hassle. But if I send you a PNG document, and that's simply the wrong format, if it's an image that you wanted, let's say it's a poster for an upcoming conference or a school dance, if it's not JPEG, you need to send it back to me and say, this doesn't follow the school's policies, please change it to a JPEG so that I can correctly use it, right? Even though you can open it, you can use PNG, it would be perfectly fine, because you've created that policy, you now need to enforce it as well. If you can do those things, when you get a new hire, we give them that information, of course, we train them this way. And we say, look, there are reasons for all of this stuff, please follow it. It gives them guidance, needed guidance. Again, not every teacher is computer savvy or whatever, and we are wasting so much time and energy and effort fucking around with shit that frankly there ought to be a policy for, or a lot of us are thinking like, man, I'm ready to just give up. Let IT do it all. Here's a handwritten paper of what I need for homework. Somebody else go make it, because there are too many possible options, there are too many different ways I can do it, and therefore there are too many ways I as a teacher can fuck up the assignment you gave me, and I'm not a person who's going to accept that. Do you see what I mean? This gets to be so frustrating that like one of these days I'm going to pop a blood vessel in my eye or something. So please talk to the stakeholders in a situation like this, the people who matter, including the teachers, as many of them as is possible. And before you create a policy, send a draft to every single teacher and say, this is what we're proposing. If you have any issues with it, speak now or forever hold your peace, so that you have buy-in from every party across the board, so that no matter what programs are being used, so that no matter what was done in the past, from today going forward, we have this set of rules that we follow it to the end, because it's the way that we bring in consistency. And from there, here's the thing. One of the arguments that you're going to hear, and what you may be thinking right now is, well, doesn't that stifle creativity? No, because we're talking on a purely technical level, okay? If you want to talk to the art department about making a movie, a video, doing some sort of cinematic production, right? They can use MP4 or AVI. It's not going to matter in the end, but technically there are big differences. Maybe your concern is the file size. How big is this file and how much of our drive space is it using? Especially if we're paying Google, we want the smallest files as possible, but we don't want to stifle creativity. So okay, let's bring them in as stakeholders, talk to them and get their buy-in on what the standard should be, and from that point on, perhaps revisit those standards every 4 or 5 years. But those are the standards, and everyone's expected to meet them. By taking away these ridiculous options that 99% of the population doesn't need, and as teachers we shouldn't have to deal with, you're getting rid of some of the confusion, you're getting rid of some of the angst, and frankly some of the anxiety and the nervousness that we teachers are going to have. Because when you say, here's a new technical thing, go figure it out, and there's a zillion options, and there's a zillion settings, and there's a zillion possible outcomes, it causes more anxiety and frustration than excitement, right? But if you give us a path, and make it kind of narrow in terms of this shit, make it narrow, then we can look at it and say, okay, I know if I run into a problem, I can at least look through the policies and get some idea of what the right answer ought to look like. And that's just going to help across the board. Please, admins, I know we're 20 minutes in and I'm just kind of ranting at y'all right now. Please do this type of thing. It's going to help everyone. And I know I'm not the only teacher around the world right now who is fed the fuck up with not having this stuff and not having guidance and having administrators say, do this thing for me, and then I go and do this thing and give it to you, and having them say, it's the wrong format. What do you mean? Where is the policy for that? Why is it the wrong format? Oh, well, I just don't like that one. Stop pulling that crap. Start getting these things together, please, so that we can understand what you're thinking and we can all be on the same page. All right, that's it. Enjoy.